All right, so let's look at where some of those issues are coming from. So the main issue I've seen in the comments here is that if you pull away from one of the sides, or probably the top or the bottom, you get a null reference exception error. And what happens when you get that null reference exception error right afterwards, those of you guys who have been following along, it probably freezes up your game. And that doesn't always happen with null reference exception errors, especially not with this particular kind. But there's a very specific reason it freezes up your game, and we're going to fix that today. One, because it's really annoying, and I've had a lot of comments about it. So shout out to, I think, Kevin Wolf, who helped a few people in the comments on his version of a solution to this, which is awesome. Since it's been a while since I posted anything in this series, it was really, really heartening to see one of the community members step up. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Anyway, so a null reference exception error in Unity happens when you're making a reference to something in your code, but the thing that you're making a reference to doesn't exist. So it would be like if I said, okay, so what I want you to do is I want you to take the dog outside, I want you to take the dog for a walk, and I want you to bring the dog back. And there is no dog to do that to. You and I would be, totally fine with that, but a computer is completely unable to move past that. As soon as you tell it to take the dog outside, it's like, well, okay, but there is no dog. I can't find a dog. So it's like it's almost endlessly searching the house for where the dog is. So the reason that that null reference exception error in this case was happening is when you pull away here, what happens is we protected away from looking at, so you make a swipe and it's looking for what's going to be, or what dot is going to be in this space, but there is no dot in that space. And because there is no dot in that space, it doesn't have anything to switch with, and it moves the game state into wait. And because the game state is in wait, it's never going to switch back to move. And since it's not going to switch back to move, if you try to swap these pieces, they won't swap. How we can fix that is by, instead of just saying, okay, take the dog outside, we're going to add just a condition there. We're going to say, all right, well, if there is a dog, then take it outside. And that's just a little bit of defensive programming that personally I'm really bad at. I have a tendency to like to see results, and so I'm bad at my early structure, and it always kicks me in the butt because I have to come back and change my projects. So essentially what we're going to do is when we're pulling away from these places, to the right, to the left, up or down, or essentially to a place where it would be null. If some of you have your refilling set to be kind of more slowly, or kind of more slow, if you have, like, let's say that you have 3 empty spaces here, if somebody were really quick and tried to pull over into this null space, you get the same error. So yeah, let's dive into the code and let's get this fixed. Okay, so in the game itself, just to show you what it looks like, the error that you're going to get in the game. If I pull to the side here, I get this unassigned reference error. And right now, I can't move any other pieces. And it appears as though the game's locked up. It hasn't, though. And what's really happened is, since we put in a state machine over here in the board class, the state machine is telling us what state we're in. And our 2 states are either wait or move. Once we pull away, if we're in the move state, then it's able to register if we make a swipe. But I set up the programming specifically so that if we make a swipe, but we're not in the move state, it's not going to register that. It's not going to make any of these dots active. It's not going to switch them. It's not going to do any of that. If I were to just manually switch this back to move, now I can, oops, there we go. Now I can interact with it as normal. So there we go. But again, if I go back in here and I pull away out into the border there where there is no space, it goes back into the wait mode. And it appears as though it's locked up, even though it hasn't. So let's go into the script so that we can actually fix this. So what I want you to do is go into your script folder and go ahead and open up your dot script. I haven't had Visual Studio open, so this is going to take a minute, so I will meet you back here when my dot script is open. Okay, so here we are in the dot script. The main issue is coming from two places. So I just kind of want to follow our logic through here, just so that everybody's on the same path as to where the error is coming from. You never want to fix an error like this in your programming unless you know exactly what caused it. Because if you just make these blind fixes and you're not sure why what you did fixed the problem, then that problem is 100% going to come up again. And that time, you'll just have to make these blind fixes again instead of knowing exactly what to do to fix it. So here's what happens. If we mouse down, if we click on one of the dots, it's going to check to see what current state the board is in. And if the board's in the move state, meaning we can move a piece, it'll register the first touch position. When we let go, it's going to, again, if it's in the move position or move state, it's going to register our final touch position, and then it's going to call this calculate angle method. The calculate angle method is going to take the final touch position and the first touch position, make sure that they're greater than a swipe resist, and if they are, then it's going to move pieces, switch the game state to wait, set the current dot to this. If it's not greater than the swipe resist, then it'll just reset the game state to move. Our issue is coming from these two parts right here, this move pieces method and wait. So what's happening is, let's say that we're on the last column and we're swiping right. So that would be a right swipe. However, it wouldn't go into any of this here because if we're in the last column, it doesn't meet this final requirement. And it wouldn't meet the requirement for an up swipe, left, or a down swipe, but it would still start this coroutine. And once it starts that coroutine, which is up here, the check move coroutine checks about the color bomb and stuff. However, it also registers this other dot right here. And I'm 100% willing to bet that if I go back here without actually checking this ahead of time, other dot has never been assigned. And because other dot is never assigned, it gets to here, and this is that dog that you told it to go for a walk. It doesn't know like what the heck you're talking about, so it just kind of keeps looking, even though it doesn't know where it is. So that's the issue. Now, to fix this, there's one thing I could do really quickly. I could take this coroutine, this check move co, and I could add it to the end of every one of these lines, and then I could also add another else statement that just switches the move state back to wait, or not wait, but to move. So I'm going to do that really quickly just to prove that that's going to work. So I'm going to cut that, and I'm just going to add it at the end of each of these. However, this is kind of a sloppy solution, and to be 100% honest with you, the kind of solution I would usually implement, even though I know it's sloppy and I know I'm not supposed to do it. Anyway, I'm going to add another else statement here just to catch anything else. And in this else statement, I'm going to say board dot current state is equal to game state dot move. And by doing this, I've made it so that this coroutine is only being called when I can definitely switch pieces, or not necessarily definitely, this still is going to have some issues. When I can switch pieces, and it's going to put us into the move state if we're pulling outside from one of those edge pieces. So if I save this, and if I go back into Unity here, hit play, and we'll see that it'll work now. I won't have those errors. So if I just grab here and pull out, I'm no longer getting this unassigned reference error. And even better, oh, no. Haha. It's still putting me into the wait position though. I wonder why. Oh, well, I guess instead of doing this else, I could have just defaulted it back to current state.move because there's no reason not to put it into that current state. Well, no, there is a reason, and I put in a coroutine for it, but there's no reason for me not to do it in this example here. So, okay, let's try it now. So if I pull away, no. Oh, that's why. Okay. Sorry. The reason it's putting it into the wait state is an order of operations problem. In my calculate angle method here, I call move pieces, and so move pieces gets called. And if I'm on one of those edge pieces pulling away, I won't meet any of these four, but I will meet this one, so it'll change the game state to move. But then, because it does these in order, it'll immediately change the game state back to wait. So what I want to do instead of having this here, I'm just going to cut this and put it there. So that now it's not being turned back to wait in like immediately after I change it to move, to the point where I can't even see that there's a difference. All right, so I'm gonna hit play. My pieces are gonna fall in. I've got my board script up here. It's currently on move. And there we go. I'm still on move, even though I pulled away. And it worked this way. Let's make sure it works this way. All right, cool. Still on move. Let's make sure down now. Cool. Still on move. And last one, let's try up. All right, cool. Still on move. So that's one way that you could solve the problem. And if you want to use that as your solution, that's totally fine. Like I said, all transparency, I would 100% use that as a solution a lot of the time, especially if this is a project I'm working on with a deadline. Although that's a really bad way to solve the problem. The reason it's a really bad way to solve the problem, and we talked about this when I did my refactoring episode, I have a lot of code here that's being repeated. Previous row equals row, or previous row equals row. That's here, and it's here, and it's here. Same thing with the column. And the rest of this is all really similar. This other dot, column plus one row, it's column row plus one, column minus one row. There's just a small difference. So for the most part, these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, these 6 lines of code are repeated again and again and again. And that's kind of against the entire principle of object-oriented design. You want to limit that happening so that, for example, if I had an error in one of these 4, it would be really, really hard for me to read it. Whereas if each of these 4 is instead calling to another method that is just doing what's in here, it would be easy for me to find where the error is if an error pops up. And not to mention just cleaner. So what I'm going to do, since this is the move pieces method, is I'm going to create another method up here. And I don't know, I'll call this like move pieces redo or something like that. So I don't know, I'll call it void move pieces actual. And this method is going to require a little bit of an input. And the reason it's going to require a little bit of an input is if I wanted to, I could have it just do 1, 2, 3 lines here, and that would be fine. But then I'd still have these 4 lines that are very similar on each of these that I don't need to be repeating. So instead, I'm just going to knock this whole thing out at once, but I'm going to need an argument. I'm going to need to know if I'm adding or subtracting to the column or adding or subtracting to the row. And the easiest way to do that is just to use a vector. So my argument here is going to be a vector2, and I'm going to call it direction. So a vector2 has an x and y coordinate, and I'm going to use the x coordinate to say if I'm adding or subtracting from the column, and the y coordinate to say if I'm adding or subtracting from the row. So I'm going to use this here from the right swipe. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste it into my move pieces actual method I just made. And it's going to give me, oh no, it didn't. Oh, okay, yeah. That's why it's not giving me any errors. So there's a few things I want to do here. you'll notice direction is really gray. The reason it's really gray is I created this argument that I'm requiring, but then I'm never actually referencing that argument anywhere in here. And so this is Visual Studio's way of telling me that this is an unnecessary argument, but I'm going to deal with that in just a second. So what I want to do is I want to say that my other dot, because I'm using an x and a y coordinate, instead of just saying it's column plus one row, because that only works for the right swipe, I'm going to say it's column plus direction.x, and it's going to give me an error there, and I'll tell you how to fix it, and row plus direction.y. The reason it's giving me an error here, if I kind of mouse over it, it'll tell me I can't implicitly convert a float to an integer. The indices of an array are integer values, and here I'm taking an integer value, the column, and adding to it a value from a vector, and values from vectors are by default floats, so I have to recast this as an integer. And then I have to do the same thing for direction.y. I have to recast it as an integer so that Unity knows to use the integer value of this, even though it's not going to be a float value because I'm going to pass it in as an integer. I just have to cover my bases. So, pardon me. So I'm going to, so for example, my direction here could be 1, 0, in which case I'm adding 1 to the column and adding 0 to the row, which leaves the row the same. It could also be 0, 1, in which case I'm adding 0 to the column and 1 to the row. It could be negative 1, 0, subtracting 1 from the column, adding 0 to the row, and it could be 0, negative 1, leaving column alone and taking 1 away from the row. So this allows me to fix quite a bit. Now I have to add 2 lines that weren't here in these 4, but by adding these 2 lines I get to cover all 4. So, okay. My direction here, let's say that my direction is right, meaning my direction has an x of 1 and a y of 0. So if I have an x of 1, I'm going to subtract 1. What I'm really going to do here is change this to adding, and instead of adding 1, I'm going to add to it negative 1 times the integer value, again casting as an integer, of direction.x. Now bear in mind that integer is, or casting to an integer is different than rounding. A lot of people will make that mistake when they're first in here. If you want it to round to the nearest integer, you need to use something else. But we're not really rounding here, we're just taking it and recasting it as this. If you cast a float to an integer, it doesn't round up. It doesn't round up. It always does the floor function. It takes it down to the lowest value. So anyway, that only covers the column though. I have to also cover the situation where it's the up or down swipes. So I'm going to copy this line. I'm going to paste it down here. I'm going to change this from column to row. I'm going to change this from direction.x to direction.y. I'm also going to change this from column plus equals 1 to column plus equals the integer value, again casting, of direction.x. And then I'm going to do something similar for the row. So row plus equals casted integer of direction.y. And then I'll do my check move coroutine. Now, to actually call this method, first of all, I don't have 100% faith in myself, so I'm going to comment out this section here. And if you've never commented out a section, I don't remember if we've done it in the tutorial series before. If you want to comment out a single line, you do these. So there we go. It bugs me when it does that. If you want to comment out a single line, you do these 2 slashes, and it'll comment out anything that's on that line, but the next line, it'll still count. If you want to comment out a section, then you do backslash asterisk, and then you kind of catch that with asterisk backslash. Or is that forward slash? I never remember. Anyway, slash asterisk. And then you catch it with asterisk slash, and then anything that's in between those two gets commented out. So I'm doing this because I'm taking out some code that I know for a fact was working, and I want to try and replace it with something else that I haven't seen work yet. So rather than deleting it, and causing myself a lot of heartache, I'm going to just comment it out for a second. Anyway, so I'm going to call this move pieces actual. And then in the move pieces actual, I'm going to call a, I'm going to give it a direction. And so the direction I need to give it, I'm going to give it vector2.right, because this is a right swipe. So I'm going to save that really quickly here. And if I jump back into Unity, I'm going to wait for that to compile. I'm going to test this out and make sure it works for the right swipes. So if it does work for the right swipes, then I'm good to kind of speed through doing it for the other directions. So there we go. That right swipe worked. That one did too. Now let's see if this one freezes the game. It does not. Cool. All right. So now what I want to do, I know that it worked, so I don't know, I'm like a code hoarder. I like to leave stuff like this in here, so I'm just going to leave it there. You can feel free to delete it. I'm going to repeat the same thing with my other directions. So with the up swipe, I'm going to comment out this section, and then here I'm going to catch my comment, and then I'm going to do move pieces actual, and I'm going to use vector2.up. Now, there is a vector2.up and there is a vector2.right. There is no vector2.left and there is no vector2.down. The reason is you can just do negative or negative 1 times negative 1 times those values, and it'll be the same thing. So like here, for my left swipe, I can't do vector2.left because that doesn't exist. Instead, I'm going to do move pieces actual, and I want to do vector2. Oh hey, vector2.left does exist in Unity. Man, what am I saying? Okay, cool. That makes my life so much easier. So then here I will comment this out, and then I'll do move pieces actual and vector2. Hey, down's there too. Nice. Okay, and so for the most part, this is fine now. I just want to check one thing really quickly here. So it puts it into wait, it checks these, and then if it's, I'm going to say else. I know I had just used this else statement here, but that should be what I need to do. All right, cool. So I'm going to save my code, and I'm going to pop back into Unity here, and I'll let that play out, or I'll let that compile the code, and I'll hit play. And here it comes in, and let me make sure that all of my movements work. Okay, so I've got all of my swipes down. Sweet. And let's go off the board, and let's make sure it doesn't freeze the game. Nice. Off the board. Doesn't freeze the game. Nice. All right. And let's do that. I get my wrapped candy, which is the last big update you guys got from me. All right. And okay, cool. So cool. Now, I did see some comments that some people were saying that they were still seeing matches when there was only 2 of them, that it would count a match 2. The reason that it counts a match 2, or at least the reason I've seen it happen for me before, is when you have your delay set relatively low. And this is another bad programming thing that I've taught you now, is in the board. Yay, is it the board method? I think it's the board method. I use some magic numbers for my delay time. If you have your delay set low, and what I mean by a magic number, let me actually just find one and show you, is here, this right here. I have my particle being destroyed after 0.5 seconds. This really should be a variable, and then I should be calling that variable here, because if I want to change my particle lifetime now, it's I have to find this whole thing. It's bad of me. And where else are some? Yeah, so here's another magic number right here that honestly should be a delay. Anyway, the reason that the delay will cause that is if it's too long when you're switching places here in the dot script, I think, right here in the check move coroutine, it can register the same dot as being both where it was and where it's going. So you could have a situation where if you have two dots right next to each other and you switch one of those with another one, it could register that one that you switched as being both where it was and where you switched it to, and then that dot being in those two positions and the one next to it counts as a match 3. So I would take a look at your delays here in your check move coroutine and just make them a little slower, and that should fix that issue. And by slower, I mean like less than 0.5 seconds, which actually makes it faster. But yeah, okay, cool. So long wait you guys had. So super appreciate you guys being here for it. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment down below. If you have any concerns, please feel free to leave a comment down below. If you learned something today, don't feel bad to give me a like. And if you didn't learn anything and you hate the sound of my voice, you can still give me a like. No one's paying attention. It's okay. I'm setting up, or I have set up a Discord server for this channel because I've been really slow to reply to my comments. I've still replied to every single comment. I've just been way slower lately. So I've set up a Discord server, and I'll disseminate some information about that. Ideally, I'd like to see a situation where if I can't reply right away, then maybe somebody else who's had a similar problem that's maybe gotten it fixed can reply, so that we can become like a little community that helps each other. So the next thing we're going to talk about here is let's do resizing the board, because right now, this is just kind of a preview of what's coming next. I don't know why I hit play. It's just an instinct. Right now that fits just right, but that's only for a board this size. If I change the size of my board, let's say I make it 3x3. I don't know why anybody would play a match 3 game that's 3x3. That doesn't make any sense. What did I? Oh, I didn't change the width. Anyway, let's change my width. Let's make my width 3. Okay, cool. And if I, so like, see, it's not centered anymore. So what I want to do is just show you how to recenter it, and then we'll talk about the empty spaces, breakable tiles, like the jellies and stuff like that. So thank you very much. Have yourself a wonderful day, and there's more coming, I promise.